Hi, good evening. This is Chani Sims, and I'm the founder of CISO Exec. Here today, we are doing another International Women's Day podcast with Marilise this time, talking about your bully-proof life. Hi, Marilise.
Hi, Chani.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
And it's so good to have you as well. I'm really looking forward to talking about your topic because that's something we talk a lot on CISO Exec. How do you create no blame cultures and bully-proof cultures? So emotional
Yeah,
resilience.
absolutely.
Yeah, this is well-needed topic. I think we need to be talking more about these things. So just a quick introduction about myself for those of you who don't know me. So CISO platform is my give back platform to the community. So this is where I do my volunteer work, and my day job is I'm a cybersecurity consultant, and I'm also managing the Meta Defense Labs business in here in UK and in Sri Lanka. And I've been in the industry for about 17 years, so my main task is mostly around virtual CISO, cyber essentials, ISO 27000 audits, and security audits. And she CISO started in 2018, kind of out of my own frustrations, being the only woman in most of my career, in most of the teams, plus the incidents that's happened in the past around bullying and things. And I thought, um, this I need to I need to look back and look at my 10 years younger self and see what I can give that person. And that's how She CISO was born. And now we kind of evolved into 5-day boot camps to create emotionally intelligent cybersecurity leaders. And we also do quarterly meetups and monthly mentoring calls, and this IWD podcast. So we're looking into going virtual now, quite actually fully virtual because of the current climate. So we are planning to have a virtual meetup soon, and also plan to have a virtual boot camp in summer. So it's going to be, we plan to do a lot of work to get the community together, help each other, and support the people who needs help. And we believe in emotionally intelligent cybersecurity leaders because a lot of the problems at workplace happen because of lack of communication, lack of confidence, lack of leadership skills, and emotional intelligence. So that's why we emphasize quite a lot on those topics. And I think this is a great topic to talk about, and we got some participants also joining. And I would like to ask everybody to go on mute, and we are getting a Q&A session at the end, so we can ask more questions as well. And I would like to ask about you. How do you got to where you are, and what's your background, and also what interesting topics or interesting things that you've done, and also how do you get to do what you do today?
Thank you, Chani. Can I just double check? Have you hit the recording button?
Yes, it's recording now.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. No, I just wasn't sure. I can't see it on my screen at the moment. It's probably because I'm presenting.
Yes.
So yes, hi, everybody. I'm Marilise de Villiers. So I have spent the last 20 years of my career as a people and change consultant. So I have literally fell in love with learning and development and behavioral change. I think I was 21 years old. Now you can probably work out how old I am. But yeah, so I found my sort of passion and my why from a very, very young age. I've just started my career. I was on track to become a chartered accountant, and I did become a chartered accountant. I was with one of the big four at the time, with PwC. But then I ended up sort of moving my way into learning and development and people and change. So I moved to the UK in 2004 on a secondment with PwC, and then properly started sort of my career in people and change and in finance. So primarily working with finance in internal audit functions because of my background. And then about 8 years ago, I had a chat with a colleague. At the time, we had this sort of cybersecurity function, you know, springing out of nowhere. It's literally just popped up one day. And I think he was a sort of CISO in the team doing consulting for clients, and just sat down with me and said, Marilise, I think, you know, we need someone like you to work with us in our team, because this is not a technology problem we're trying to solve. This is a people problem. And then I fell in love with cybersecurity. I mean, it took me about 3 years just to understand the language. But yeah, I've never looked back. So I've literally spent the last 8 years working in all sorts of areas in cybersecurity, but primarily all the human aspects. So everything from raising awareness to behavioral change, to skills and talent and workers of the future. So quite a breadth of topics, but everything related to people and culture. And then about 2 years ago, I left an organization to start my own company. And the reason I left was really because I reached burnout in my career. I was completely stressed out. And it was unfortunately as a result of a bullying situation that's lasted for sort of 4 years. And I was determined to succeed, but I just mentally and physically couldn't cope with it anymore. So I made the decision to walk away. And because I just couldn't see a way that I will ever work as an employee in an organization ever again, I then decided to start my own company. And, you know, it's just evolved from there. So last year in December, I published my book. It's called ROAR, ROAR, How to Tame the Bully Inside and Out. And that's sort of what I'll be talking to you a little bit more about tonight or today, is about sort of, you know, creating your bullyproof life. So some of the lessons that I've learned to share with you. Yeah, and I continue to build I call it my influencer business. So I really want to help people, recognize the signs of bullying, because a lot of the times you get bullied and then you justify the other person's behavior. So I want people to be able to call it out. So the roar is all about speaking up and finding the courage to actually say, you know, this is not okay. I won't allow you to treat me like this, kind of thing. So yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment.
Great. I think this is a topic very close to my heart, and it's very similar to my journey as well. Yeah, so thanks for that. And I'll now shut up and I'll let you do the presentation.
Thank you.
Really
And
looking forward to it.
do you know, I mean, I'm so happy for you to just ask questions as I go, because I'm conscious that, you know, I can talk and talk and talk, but if you tell me what you know, so if interrupt me, if you want to ask a question, you know, just feel free to do that.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll try and limit, because I can write a book about this. I just can't wait to find a time to write my story around this. But it's a massive topic, I think.
They do say we all have a book in us, and you know, I think for me that this was probably, yes, it was one of the toughest things I've ever done, but it was also one of the most rewarding things, because the experience just helped me also heal. I think a lot of the times, you know, we put situations behind us and we don't necessarily take the time to actually heal properly, and then all these things come back later in your life. So I think it was important for me and my personal journey to be able to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, CISO is my healing process pretty much.
And that's it. And it's about giving back as well. I think you recognize through hardship and tough times that actually, you know, there's a bigger purpose in life, and you know, we do these things because we want to make a difference in the world. We want to make the world a better place. You know, we want to make it better for those that come after us. You know, and I genuinely think, you know, if I knew 10 years ago what I know now, I probably would have been a lot better equipped to deal with the bully. And I also recognized that it wasn't just the bully, it was also me being my own biggest bully. So when I started writing the book, it was very much about the bully, the person who actually did it to me. And then as I progressed through my research and obviously my own development and my own you know, healing process, I realized that I was actually own biggest bully. And that's why the title, I'll just show you a quick copy. The title of the book is actually How to Tame the Bully Inside
Yeah.
and Out. So I focused a lot more on the inner bully, and probably a lot less on the outer bully, because at the end of the day, a bully can only bully, if there's a volunteer or a victim that allows the bully to bully them.
Right.
But also the culture of the organization allows it to happen. So we talked about HR earlier, Shani, so I'll share a little bit of the statistics from my book, from my research study. I did a global research study, which the results were quite insightful and sort of backed up my conclusions quite beautifully. So I'll share a little bit more about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Cool. So what I would like to get out of this session is really to just help you define what is workplace bullying, and I'll put it into the context of narcissism. So when I started my research, I was very intrigued by, I was sort of intrigued. My question was, are all bullies narcissists? And I couldn't really understand the concept, because narcissism is such a broad topic and a controversial topic. And then, I've managed to sort of draw the parallels. So I'll talk a little bit about them, narcissism, and, I'll talk about the toxic trio. So really, as I said earlier, there's always a bully, a victim, and a culture. So the bully cannot bully without a culture that allows the bullying to take place in the first place. So, and then, as I say, someone that's actually being targeted. I don't really like the word victim, but, let's call it target, someone that's actually being targeted by the bully. And of course, you end up becoming the victim because of the effects that it has on you. But then, of course, when you get out of the situation, then you become, you survive, but also thrive. And I think that's where I want people to get to, is to thrive, like you are now, Chani, and all the amazing work you're doing. It's quite beautiful to see. And I want people to see, if you can do it and I can do it, so can they, So if you're in a situation, we can all rise above it. And it might feel like your world is ending right now, but actually, I always say to people, your best life is on the other side of your biggest obstacles. So you've got to face it, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
Yeah, I always say, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger.
Absolutely, and it's so true. And I also, for me, I've come to learn that, it's in these tougher situations where you realize just how strong you are, because you've also got to kind of accept at some point that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And everything happens for a reason, or a blessing or a lesson. You've got to take the good out of a situation, and there's a reason why things happen to you, and you can always turn it into something positive, and something impactful. So helping you spot the signs that you're dealing with a bully or a toxic culture, to recognize your own behaviors. I talked a little bit about the inner bully. So what are you doing? What are those limiting beliefs, those fears, those kind of stories that you tell yourself? And then, I'm hoping by the end of this session that you'll feel inspired to take steps, towards building what I call your bullyproof life. So I'll start with what it is, the definition. We'll look at the toxic trio. I'll do a little bit of what is it going to take? So there's different things in your life that you've got to put in place and get certain things in place. And then I'll also challenge you by the end of the session to take some steps, because you may not be in a bullying situation today. You may just be perfectly fine, but you may be your own bully. So I want you to recognize as well, is there anything going on for you that may be holding you back, in terms of how you show up every day, in terms of how you interact with other people, so yeah, we'll look at that. So what is workplace bullying? So if you take the definition from the Workplace Bullying Institute in the United States, it's the repeated health-harming mistreatment of one or more persons, so the targets, by one or more perpetrators. So essentially it is abusive conduct, right? Threatening, humiliating, intimidating behavior, It can be work interference or work sabotage, so it prevents you from getting the job done, or it's verbal abuse. So those are sort of the key characteristics. And, you know, I think a lot of the times, I think what's important to recognize here is that it's not always overt, so it's not always obvious, it's not always aggressive bullying. You know, it's a lot of the times it happens very passive aggressively. It can be very covert, you know. It's sort of, I always think about it as kind of this manipulative behavior, and oftentimes, you know, if it's a real toxic bully, you know, they know how to play the game. You know, they're very, very masterful at sort of towing that line, you know, where they're not going to get caught out. And that's why I think it's so hard to actually call this out, because what is happening is sort of this mind game of actually, is he doing it? Is she doing it? Am I going crazy? Am I the problem? So you've got all this sort of internal dialogue going on, which doesn't necessarily help, because you're trying to justify that person's behavior. And I think that's what we do all the time. So we don't necessarily believe that that individual has, you know, malicious intent. We kind of trust that people come with good intentions. And unfortunately, you know, what is quite staggering is that potentially 1 out of 20 people are toxic bullies, you know, have what we call narcissistic personality disorders. So 5% of people who come to work every day potentially can be a toxic individual. So that's quite staggering. I was really, really surprised when I read that, because I'm like, 1 in 20, really?
That's quite
crazy, right? Anyway, so that's unfortunately the reality. And I think what made me realize how rife it is, because when I left my previous employment, I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm the only person this has ever happened to. Like, I didn't actually think that it happened to anybody else. It felt like, shit, but how can this happen to anybody? Like, this was all about me. I was the problem. I failed. So I was kind of going through all this stuff. And then 2 weeks after I left, you know, and 3 weeks after I left, I'm having conversations with people. And every time I have a conversation, everybody has a relatable story to share. And the people I'm talking to are senior executives in their organizations. You know, they're high flyers, they're high performers. And I'm like, what is going on with the world? You know, and suddenly I'm realizing that actually this is a silent epidemic. It happens everywhere all the time, you know, and the bullies get away with it because, of course, they can just sweep it under the carpet. They can pretend that the other individuals or the people complaining are, you know, are crazy. Not that I would say they're crazy, but you know what I mean? Is they can make you out to feel crazy. Obviously, you've got the issue with HR, which I'll come on to, but essentially HR works for the company. They don't work to protect your best interest, you know. So there's lots of different complications and dynamics that play out, right? But yeah, I was just completely, I could not believe that so many people have actually been exposed to it and have been victims of it. And you can see the statistics there on the screen for my study. You know, 70% of people said that they were a targeted witness of both. 90% of the case, 97% of the cases, the bully was more senior or a peer. So I think that's I always use the phrase, you know, they kiss up and they kick down. So it's basically, you know, they're very, very good at managing their senior stakeholders. But the moment they deal with their, you know, their teams, they become these absolute monsters, and they kick and they demean, and they just become these like people that abuse their positions of power. So it's all about abuse of power, isn't it, at the end of the day? And then interestingly, sorry, Shani, you want to say?
I think it's also lack of confidence. I've noticed that some of the bullies come from not having the right confidence levels, self-esteem. So they eventually feel threatened if someone comes and a peer normally works with them, and they feel threatened, and they try to attack that person because they're fearing that they're going to replace their job or they're going to take over. You know, that kind of attitude also I've seen in the workplace. I've had that kind of experience where is
and
really confidence.
that's spot on, right? Because
Mm.
what happens, and this is what really blew my mind, because I was like, I couldn't believe it when I read this, and I read that, you know, most of the times the bullies or the narcissists, they actually target the highest performers, the people that are the biggest threat to them. And I'll come on to this, but it's because of this winner versus loser mentality. So in the bully's mind, I'm just going to move on, just because I want to get to this bit. So in the bully's mind, so, and obviously I look at bullying in the context of narcissism, you know, so I'm looking at, and this is what I describe or explain in my book, is this concept called healthy narcissism. So again, you know, it's like narcissism is a word we use so much, and we use it to describe anybody who's a little bit self-entitled or, you know, arrogant. We use the word so easily, but at the end of the day, it is actually something we all have. We all have narcissism, and it's a drive to feel special.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with it, you know. For us to be able to achieve our passions, you know, or to pursue our dreams and to turn our dreams into reality, you must have some form of healthy narcissism, right? In terms of, you know, the confidence to progress and to proceed and to, you know, to take action and to show up, you know. So those are all really positive traits. But it comes back to your point around confidence, Chani. So if it's a healthy type of narcissism, you know, you don't do it at the cost of other people. So when you move into the subtle narcissism range and the kind of the habit range, you've got a sense of entitlement. So people feeling entitled to you know, being treated special, you know, being so there's a bit of a kind of a, you know, I deserve this, you know, I'm owed this. It's like the world owes me something kind of approach. And then obviously the further up you go to the 10 part of the scale, it becomes more extreme. So that's where you have, out of 10, you have the narcissistic personality disorder. And that's where you have the addiction, right? And that's where people are willing to exploit others at all costs, you know. And I think that's where, you know, it's that sort of, I've got to win at all costs. So this winner versus loser mentality, and I'm not sure where I've put that here. I'm a winner and you are a loser. So it's essentially, as I said earlier, the narcissist in their mind, or the bully narcissist in their mind, has to win at all costs, and therefore they've got to compete with the best people. So it's not like the school ground bully where they target the weakest person. It's actually the best people, the highest performers, that are targeted, which for me was staggering. I just could not believe it, you know. So yeah, so I just wanted to so the reason why I look at narcissism in this context, and I kind of position healthy narcissism, is because I wanted to focus a lot on what do we have in common, not necessarily what are our differences, but what do we have in common? Because let's face it, we all get narcissistic at times, right? We all feel a little bit entitled sometimes, you know. We feel a little bit jealous if someone achieves something that, you know, you think, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. Or when you see a social media post and someone's doing really well, and you really want to feel good for that person or happy for that person, but you're thinking, oh gosh, that should be me. You know, it's like, we're just human beings, we're fallible, and we all get narcissistic, you know. But if it's in the habit range, we can always get back to the healthy range if we remind ourselves of the behavior, if we self-correct, and we sort of address it, and we sort of what do I say? It's like, you know, we at least we're aware, and we apologize, and we don't repeat the behavior. So I think what you see with people who are extreme or toxic bullies, they really, the behavior persists, you know. So, and for me, in my kind of 4-year journey with my bully, it was very much, I always describe it as a roller coaster ride, because one day he would be the best boss to work for, and the next day be like a monster, you know. And it was like this roller coaster was what I think killed me at the end, because I couldn't anticipate anymore. And I kept guessing. It's this guessing game. Is he going to be in a good mood tomorrow? Is he going to be in a bad mood tomorrow? And that sort of energy, I guess, that you expend, it's just really, really expensive. It's that sort of, I say in my book as well, the person becomes your energy vampire, because they just suck all the lifeblood out of you. So, I mean, Marjane, does this resonate with you in terms of, you know, describing it as something we all have? And
Yeah, I think it's
surprise
just,
to you?
yes, because a lot of things, I mean, we all want to be appreciated and we want to do good.
Yeah.
And but it's like being jealous, or you know, for others, or not doing something, and trying to fight someone else and put them down doesn't really help your case, right?
No,
That's
absolutely.
kind of what I see in narcissists, where their only interest is to somehow, they're kind of blind as well. They don't
Yeah.
see past their insecurities. So they
Yes.
just go on, like, you know, bullying other
Yeah.
people, or
Yeah.
talking down on people. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know how it goes in their mind, because I think there's a personality disorder that comes with it as well. Like you said,
Yeah.
the different
Mm.
mood swings. You know,
Yes.
one day
Yes.
they're good, one day, the next day you never know. You can't predict
Yeah.
what this person is going to do next, which is really,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, it's very toxic to be around in that kind of
Mm.
person, because
Yeah.
you know, it brings you down as well. You know, you're
Yeah.
always like having to walk on eggshells.
Absolutely. And the behavior that I saw a lot is this idea that they can't see how they're part of the problem. Although
No.
they create the problems,
Yeah.
they can't really see how they're part of the problem, or they know it but they won't acknowledge it, or they genuinely don't know it. Because I could never work out whether, you know, in my case, they knew or they didn't know, and they were just they knew and they were kind of malicious about it, or they honestly didn't know. And that's where I think the personality disorder comes in, because I genuinely think, and based on the literature that I've read, books and books and books on narcissism, they all kind of say that the narcissists actually don't know. They're unaware of their behavior, and they obviously lack empathy, so they don't have the understanding. You talk about emotionally intelligent, you know, leaders. They don't have the understanding of their of the impact of their behaviors on others.
Yeah.
It's just
Sometimes,
completely missing, right?
exactly. Yeah. Some people, yes, like you said, they don't know. Some of them, it's it's also down to some of the cultures I've had, where, you know, people from different cultures, they think it's okay to treat women in that way.
Yeah.
And that I've had that experience as well, where they actually don't know that's the right or wrong behavior until someone points them out. But then there is also that opportunity when someone points it out, then you have opportunity to apologize to
Mm-hmm.
that person, understand, yes, I did something terribly wrong.
Yeah.
It's now my opportunity to correct it and
Yeah.
apologize. But if they
Yeah.
don't do that, that means then there's something really wrong, because there's the
Absolutely.
element of not knowing it, and then once you find out that actually you've done something wrong, then correcting is another step.
Yes.
um, so some people, yes, don't know. Some people actually, when they know, then the ego gets in, and then all these other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying.
Yeah.
It's different types of human beings, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say to people, it's such a complex complex problem, you know. And it was funny because I had a conversation with a friend just literally weeks after I left my organization, and she was quite like, she's like, why didn't you leave sooner? As if, you know, why would you stay 4 years in a situation like that? And I was so irritated. I was like, what, you know, who does she think she is? How dare you ask me something like that, you know? And obviously, and I think I just said, oh, it's complicated. And I'm like, obviously, because I was just being kind of a little bit defensive, and I couldn't make sense of it myself at the time. It was 3 years ago, you know. It was hard for me to navigate what was going on, you know. And I didn't realize how complicated, at the time. And I realize now, this is, as you say, this is human behavior. It's just, you don't know, and you don't know how people are going to behave.
Yeah, and also you're not prepared to handle that kind of thing until it's happened and passed, right?
Yeah,
So I've had
exactly.
where I was kind of badly treated in a project, and I sucked it up, and then I thought I'm not going to leave in the middle of the project because then they can fault my work.
Yeah.
So I had to make sure that I finished the project, delivered everything to the best of my abilities, then leave and address it later, because because these kind of things can go really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been bullied in a project, certainly in my case, if you leaving everything halfway, the project is in trouble, and then they can come back and say you didn't deliver the work, and then all sorts of other problems. So I had to kind of continue with this
Yes.
person,
Yes.
finish everything, and then deal with my bullying situation. But when it happened, I didn't know how to react because
Yeah.
it's never happened to you before, and then you like go into kind of a shock thinking, how do I
It's
respond to this,
shock.
right?
It's
Yeah.
absolute shock. And I mean, obviously, what do we do when we're in shock? We either fight, we flight, or we freeze. And I think a lot of
Yeah,
the
freeze is
times,
the word. Yeah.
freeze is what's happening with a lot of people, because you're in such shock that you don't know. And because the person is in a position of power, you can't just fight back, because there's an
Yeah.
element and a cultural thing in maybe your case and my case, because I didn't grow up in the UK, but I come from a culture in South Africa where you respect your elders, right? You
Yeah.
don't speak up, you don't talk back at them, because if they say something, it's right, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
culturally, it plays a big role. And obviously you can't just flight either, because it's kind of getting defensive, walking away is so all those behaviors are problematic, right? So it is about almost, and that's the whole point of my book, is for people to recognize when it happens, and to shield themselves, to recognize this is not about me, this is not personal, even though it feels incredibly personal, but this is about what that person is doing to me right now says more about them than it says about me.
Yeah.
But it's those sorts of mindsets that we've got to develop, and it takes time, and it takes experience, and it takes practice. One thing
Yeah.
I just want to say, and I'm obviously running behind now, but I just wanted to pick up on something you said about finishing the project and then going. I was the same. I was like, there's no way I am going to give him the pleasure of leaving the organization before I've actually delivered my work, before I've actually proven that I fixed this problem. And obviously this was not a fixable problem, which again, I didn't understand at the time. I thought I could
Yeah.
fix him, and I thought I could fix the problem, which wasn't fixable. I'm like, okay, anyway. And one of the biggest mistakes I've made was actually not to walk away and go on sick leave, because I thought that would have been a sign of failure. And actually, I think now the way that I encourage people to say, if your mental health is struggling, and physical health, to the point where you cannot think clearly, where you've got anxiety. I had daily anxiety attacks for 6 months. You've got to find somehow the courage to walk away and look after yourself and your own health and getting better. So I kind of say now, to walk away and to go on sick leave, for example, even if it's just for a few weeks, just to get your perspective back, is actually a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. But
Right.
I think it's one of the hardest things to do when you're a high achiever like we are. We want to deliver the best work. We want to succeed. And we don't want those people to win. We want to, in a way, we're kind of a little bit narcissistic ourselves, because we want to prove that we can do it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I think the dynamic plays out.
That's really good advice, because I never thought of going on sick leave. Um,
Yeah.
when I've had few occasions, um, but something that happened recently, I had the strength to walk away. I
Fantastic. Well done.
decided, my sanity was important than my salary.
But
and
did you
and
do it because of the previous experience as well? Because you recognized.
Yes, I
what it
definitely
was doing to
recognize it.
you.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I also think being mindful is also really important.
yeah.
That's why I go on about emotional intelligence. You need to be able to understand how you're feeling
Hmm.
and also what the other person is doing and where they're coming from, so that
Yeah,
you can also put yourself in their shoes to try and understand what they're actually trying to do. Are they really
yeah,
being bullying,
yeah.
or are they trying to get a point across?
Yes,
Sometimes, that
yes.
could be the case, that this could be the way that
Absolutely,
someone talks. Like if you
absolutely.
some
Yeah,
I don't know, if you work with some kind of neurodiverse people, they don't have
yeah,
a lot of those communication soft skills.
absolutely,
So it could
absolutely.
be the way that person talks. So being able to having the capability to understand that is so important, so that you understand yourself plus the other person,
Yeah,
and then you then analyze, okay, what is actually happening, and if it keeps happening, and then you come to a conclusion, just seeing the facts and everything, and saying,
yeah,
actually, this person's not being a bully or being a bully, then you
mm,
can make that right decision based
yeah,
on those information and the things that you've seen.
yeah, yeah,
So I went through that process. So I was
mm,
talking to a lot of my colleagues, friends, getting advice as well at the same time, and also trying to
yeah,
understand what I want.
yeah,
And when kind of I realized, actually, so this, I don't want to work with this person, and then
yeah,
it's really toxic. It's not me, or
yeah,
it's just the way that person is. So I decided I'm just going to walk out, and there was no other way to move forward rather than being in that area, which means that they're
yeah.
going to bring us also down, and that means,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth. Sometimes you have to pick your battles, I think, in most
Absolutely.
cases. Yeah.
But the fact that you've been able to do that, I just want to call that out for a moment, because I think that that shows incredible progress on your part in terms of your own healing process, and that you've come to a place where you understand your own value, and you connected with your purpose, and you didn't want to sacrifice or compromise that. And you know I think that's really important, to recognize the progress that you've made yourself personally, to be able to get yourself to a point where you're able to sort of say, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm actually, you know, I'm actually okay with not doing this.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that happens when you are, like, I think both of us are empaths, we like to, to give, we're givers. I think people and especially narcissists, they abuse that as well, so I always say to people, I'm a people pleaser. I love pleasing people, and I struggle to say no. And I think at the end of the day, it's learning those skills, and as you say, the skills to be able to say no, and to be able to walk away, and to know your value, and to have your boundaries. So to have those boundaries in place to protect yourself. So
Yeah.
absolutely,
Something, would you recommend, like, if you see something happening now? I always say that, like I learned today, that going on sick leave is really good. I've never done that
yeah,
in my life.
yeah, yeah,
Something I've also learned is writing down
yes,
everything when
yes,
it starts happening. Write it down, recording it, time and notes, who
yes,
said to
absolutely,
this, everything, because that also has helped me,
yes.
um, in terms of, if you want to file a case later on, or if you want to
Yes.
submit it on your exit interview, uh, that's your evidence, right? And I think
Yes.
that also helps sometimes.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I do that. I have a section right at the end of the book which is saying, if you've tried everything, if you've tried to smooth things over, and nothing seems to be working, you have the legal options available to you. And one of the very first things I say is document everything. I started documenting everything a year before I left, and when the pawpaw hit the fan, it was incredible how much it sort of helped my case, in terms of being able to show that I'm not crazy, I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
And it was important, as you say, to have specific dates and times. And I actually I started sharing it with my husband, so he had a record of everything. So no, it was really important. I think absolutely 100% write things down. every detail you can. So I think that's really, really key. I mean, I'm enjoying this. I'm loving the questions and the interaction. I'm obviously completely off my
Don't worry about it. I
off
think this
my
is
thing
something
now.
we can go into.
But I said a little bit about the toxic trio earlier. So I kind of recognize, that a bully cannot bully without a victim and an organizational culture that allows the bullying to happen in the first place. So obviously it's important to recognize the signs, and I'll show you just a kind of, I've got sort of 10 signs to look out for. I think as the victim, or the targets, it's important to recognize your own behavior. And I always use the sort of, I always say to people, a bully cannot take your power unless you give them your powers. So the only things that you can control is, what you think and how you feel and what you say and what you do. So those are kind of your 4 superpowers. And if you're not using those superpowers, that's when the bully take those superpowers away from you and they use it as their superpowers, so somehow it's about learning those skills to protect yourself and to hold on to your power. And I'll give you a few tips in a moment. And then culturally, we talked about earlier before we came live, Chani and I talked about HR, and both of us had fairly sort of adverse experiences with HR ourselves. And actually my research also shows that, very few cases HR have actually been able to resolve the matter successfully. I think less than 10% of cases. And over half of people who completed the survey actually said that they didn't actually inform HR because of fear of retribution, because they actually didn't trust HR to protect them, to have their best interests at heart, because HR works for the company, right? So it's quite shocking, the statistics that we're seeing. So it's basically a call out as well to HR functions to raise their game and to do the right thing, because in my view, HR is the custodian of the culture of the organization. So I think it's so important that they protect that culture and they stamp out these toxic behaviors.
I don't think going forward, these kind of cultures can exist and they be successful at the same time. Things are changing so fast in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people are going to realize that, do they want to waste their life being in a toxic place, or do you want to go and find an employer who actually appreciates the work, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it is changing, and if the companies and their behavior, if they don't change that, then they're only going to fail eventually.
Absolutely, and I think with the millennials and the younger generations coming through, I mean, they are actually setting a really amazing example for us, because they are actually saying we won't work for companies that do not share the values of of me, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I come from a generation where, we were always just focused on career opportunities and find the best job. And, success is measured by being a partner in a big 4 firm, and it was always this sort of external drivers. And it was always goals that were set by other people for me. I think what I'm seeing now in the youngsters is this, like, people are so connected with purpose and so connected with their values, and actually, not compromising those values as easily as I think people in my generation, have been doing historically and probably continue to do, just because of habits and behaviors that we've developed over the years. So what to look out for? So I talked about this overarching sort of mentality of I'm a winner and you are a loser. So you can imagine that a toxic bully is really, that's kind of forefront in their mind. So they have to show that they are the winner at all costs. And they have to make you out to be the loser. And remember what I said earlier about the bullies wanting to compete with the best? So if you're the best person in the team, you're probably going to be the target as well. And then, so there are sort of 6. So the addiction to attention and feeling special. So that's the entitlement. frequently treating people as targets. That's kind of exploiting people. Lacking empathy, ethics, and morals. I think we've touched on a few of these already, so I'll just run through these pretty quickly. But it's really about disregarding the well-being of others. And when I say well-being, I mean mental as well as physical well-being. Very important. They thrive on drama, crisis, and they turn challenges into conspiracies against them. Incapable of feeling guilty or remorseful, so they don't learn from their mistakes. So you picked it up, Chani. You said that if we become sort of accidental bullies, if we make a mistake, at least we can turn around and we can say sorry. But of course, these people don't seem to. The toxic bullies don't seem to be able to do that. Irresponsible, self-destructive, dismissing people who are not 100% loyal. Pattern of short-term relationships. I see lots of nodding.
Yeah.
Bragging about outsmarting people, and then they live in a fantasy world, so they just lie without even blinking. Quite deluded, I should say, as well. So yeah, so those are sort of my sort of top 10 signs that I always look out for. It's not immediately obvious. In most cases, you've got to work with someone for a while before you can actually say, and even then, we're not psychologists or psychiatrists, we can't make formal diagnoses. But I always go back to my instinct and trusting my guts.
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest litmus test is, what does your gut tell you?
That's
So
so true. It's like
yeah,
your gut is your bully detector pretty much, or
oh,
anything, with anything.
absolutely,
If you gut,
absolutely.
if you don't feel right about something, then there's something
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Always.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's very true.
you talked about emotional intelligence earlier. I would kind of take it one step further, and I almost want to call it emotional fitness, because it's also for me about not just being able to sort of read situations and read people, but it's almost that the fitness for me comes into how do you train your brain to be emotionally fit, so to kind of manage your state, to kind of,
More resilient.
yes, I think it is probably kind of
Yeah.
connected to the resilience, yeah, and how you reframe your thinking so that it is positive and it is empowering and it is resilient and all those sorts of good things.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just sort of wanted to pick up on some of the common pitfalls, and I mentioned this earlier. So in my research, the three ways people said they most typically respond was either to keep quiet and to get defensive, or to confront the bully. Now, none of those tactics are effective tactics to use. Because I remember in my case it was always, if people didn't respond, he would say, "Oh, picture no sound," in such a demeaning way, and it was just like, but people didn't know what to say. It was that shock factor, is exactly what you described earlier. It's like you freeze because you just don't know.
Mm.
After you've had a lashing, a verbal lashing, how do you respond? It's really hard, isn't it? I got defensive a lot, and I confronted as well a lot. So I made all the mistakes in the book. But yeah, what doesn't kill you do make you stronger, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
I mean, I've never had I've had one opportunity to confront that was, it was more like actually say that in a nicer way.
Mhm.
But even if you, but I've never had the opportunity to actually get defensive or confront most of the time, where that's where it can break you sometimes, because you freeze. You don't know
Yeah,
how to react. You're too
yes,
innocent or naive to actually even know what to say.
yes,
And then later on, then it hits you like crazy. It's you thinking you didn't defend yourself, you didn't stand up for yourself. It just, you start blaming yourself, and that's
yeah,
the most depressing state that you can go to, and that
yeah,
you should not let that pass. And once you go through that, it's, you can even go into depression. That's what
yeah,
you have to be very careful, like understand what's
yeah.
happening within you.
Absolutely, and I think linked to that is also the feeling of of almost like shame, because if you're, I mean, I've actually got a case study in my book of someone who was a senior exec, and they were in a kind of a boardroom scenario where they were all being kind of bullied, or one of them were being bullied. But then they've got all the observers, you've got all the bystanders, and none of the people in the room had the courage to say, you know, the way that you've just spoken to that person is not okay. And in the process, you actually feel embarrassed, and you actually feel like you almost hate yourself for not speaking up, for not doing something about it. And I think that shame factor as well becomes very problematic then if you haven't actually looked out for your team, or the fact that you didn't stand up against the bully is like, now your team look at you and they're like, it's almost like less respect they have for you. So you lose respect. I think it's more respect, maybe not shame. It's more losing respect for yourself, and others losing respect for you. I think it's a respect thing.
Yeah, and also it's quite shameful sometimes, you know, you see a colleague or, you know, someone next to you being treated badly, but you don't do anything, and that's also very really terrible thing to do, because you're seeing that person going through hell, but you don't stand up for someone else. You don't do anything about that person, you know, at least say something. People don't do that, and that's terrible, I think. I've had
Absolutely.
where I was sat in a conference room with about 20 people, all clients. Then this person comes to me and showing me the middle finger, or the
Oh
F
no.
F thing, F
Oh
word,
no, that's
and
terrible.
not a single man stand up and saying, look, this is not right what you're doing, you know. And that's a disgusting situation to be in, you know. You're thinking,
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
you start
that's,
to question the morality of these people
yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. Absolutely. 100% question it. And actually, whether they actually, you know, right in their minds
Yeah.
or right in their heads, I don't know why would you speak to, and this is where I always talk about being demanding versus being demeaning, because I'm all for high performance. I'm all for creating high performing cultures and high performing teams, and being demanding, you know, because you've got to be demanding, you know, but you're demanding doesn't mean you've got to be demeaning. There's a massive difference between being demanding versus demeaning. um, and true leaders, they know the difference, right? They know that by being open and honest and transparent in your communications and explicit, you know, about where people need to improve their performance, will always be um, the best way to lead, where you don't have to, as you say, raise your middle finger or swear or verbally abuse or derail projects, and demean others to achieve what you want to achieve. So there's a strong kind of theme around leadership as well in my book, because I want leaders to do the right thing, the moral thing. What is the moral thing to do, right?
Yeah, I mean we all swear. There's swearing and there's swearing at people. That
Oh
there's the
yes,
difference.
yes,
So that's kind of where I think, I mean, um I swear a lot, but it
yeah,
doesn't
me
mean
too.
that, you know, you're, you know, be malicious. But some people, when they do certain things, it come across, you know, destroying that person. But
Yes,
not
absolutely.
to say a single word when you're seeing someone else being treated in a bad way is even wrong, because that shows how toxic the cultures can be.
Yeah, and that's when you become complicit, you know. And I think that is worse. I think that is, how do you actually sleep at night? So,
Yeah, I mean, is that how you
yeah,
want your sister to be
yeah,
treated, your wife to be treated,
exactly,
you
exactly.
know, anybody else treated? So
Yeah, I'm very conscious of time. Are we okay to still go for another few
yeah,
minutes?
sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, coping strategies. So I kind of, you know, think it's important, you know, when you go into conversations with people, to have this I'm okay, you're okay mindset. So it is really about, you know, I'm okay and you are okay. So not to have any biases to cloud your judgment. So to feel good about yourself and to feel good about the other person and to have positive regard, if you keep your mind open like that, you know, the chances are that you'll have a more productive interaction is really, really good. Even if you're dealing with a bully, because you can stay neutral, you can try and stay a bit neutral. Holding on to your power. So I mentioned that earlier. You've got 4 things that you can control. You can control the way you think, you feel, what you say, and what you do. That's the only 4 things you can control. Those are your 4 superpowers, right? So you've got to hold on to that. You must block the emotional hot potato pass. So what you must recognize here is what the narcissist or the bully is trying to do is they're trying to project onto you their own insecurities. So how they're feeling deep down inside, they're trying to actually throw you that hot potato, and they're actually trying you to get to catch the hot potato. So that's why we call it an emotional hot potato. So they're trying for you to project that emotion onto you. So the way that they make you feel is actually the way that they actually feel deep down themselves. And you picked up on that earlier, the insecurities, didn't you? And then 4, 5, and 6 is just the inverse of the common pitfalls. So don't keep quiet, don't get defensive, and don't fight the bully. You know, just and obviously those are very obvious, but I kind of talk a little bit more in my book about some of the techniques of how to do that. And then I come on to your bullyproof life. So what will that take, you know? And this is kind of, when I walked away from this 20-year career in corporate, where I got to kind of burn out and, you know, rock bottom, after this 4-year experience with a bully, I needed to do something with my life for life, you know. So I needed to work out, what am I going to do to build the life that I want, and actually recognizing, first of all, that what reconnect with my passion and my purpose in life, you know, and become this high performer. So high performance, really, if you look at the screen there, the definition is to reach heightened levels of personal and professional success consistently over the long term, doing what you love while maintaining positive relationships and personal well-being. So this is about personal and professional success. So this is not just about work. So I was so in love with work that I neglected my relationships at home. So when I looked again, my husband and my 2 kids, my 2 beautiful children, were kind of surviving without me, because I was so consumed with work and what was happening, and the relationships there were just at rock bottom. And I was like, never again am I going to jeopardize those relationships ever in my life, ever again, you know. And so I think for me it was about winning the inner game. So mindset, doing real kind of mindset work every day, meditation, taking the time out just to recuperate and to just, you know, make time for me. Winning the outer game is all about how you show up, you know, energy. I always kind of say energy for life, you know. How do you refuel your body with good food, with regular exercise, all that sort of good stuff. And then finally, it's that communication with impact and influence, you know. So roar is all about finding your roar and finding your voice, you know, your authentic voice, and speaking up against these sorts of situations, whether you're the target or the witness. I think, you know, we've kind of picked up on the importance of also calling it out, even if you are, or especially when you are not the target and you're observing it, because it's easier to call it out when you're not directly impacted by it, I think, but we just don't seem to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I talked about the 4 superpowers. So, you know, this is what you can control. And I think it's about developing the skills, the mindset and the skills and the capabilities to really kind of, you know, become that sort of, you know, lioness or lion, you know, to roar and to really protect yourself from the enemy, for want of a better word. So yeah, so I don't know, I mean, what I was going to do next is just to say, what 3 steps will you take? So if you are in a situation where you are maybe the target, you know, what are the sorts of things that you can do, and the things that I did, the first three things I did, you know, first of all, I had to get honest about my situation and face it. So eventually I got to the point where I walked away, but it was about me getting honest with myself and getting clear about what I wanted my life to look like. So I just wasn't happy with where I was and what was going on. And even though the clarity only came after I left, it came very quickly after I left, because I was out of that toxic environment. So I could get perspective again, and then to get help. So one of the best things that I did was to actually work with a transformational coach, to get my mental and physical health back on track. So I did a 4-month transformation program where, you know, she kind of helped me with my eating, with my exercise, with my mindset. It was so amazing how that accelerated my results in terms of being able to get my life back on track, essentially. So yeah, so what 3 steps will you take, you know? And it can be little steps. It doesn't have to be big steps, but I wanted to encourage you all to think about not just if you're dealing with a bully, but also thinking about maybe that inner bully, the inner voice that, you know, has those fears, those limiting beliefs, you know,
The
lack of
imposter
confidence.
syndrome.
Yes, the imposter syndrome. So it doesn't just need to be the external bully, it can also be your inner bully, remember? Yeah,
No,
so I
that's
think
great. I think
that's me. So that was just a recap of the objectives. So it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I hope you found that helpful.
no, that was so good. I mean, like I said, it's close to my heart, and the 3 steps that I could I really agree with you, because I did the same 3 steps when I was last in a situation like that, where um, I kind of understood. I tried to understand the situation, so where it's coming from, you know, why the person is doing something like that, and then I kind of questioned myself to see if I'm doing something wrong,
Mhm.
um, and then found out that I kind of done what I have to do. Then I cross-check with, you know, my friends and my husband to see, am I doing something wrong, you know, or am I seeing something differently? And then
Yeah,
verify that what I'm feeling is not me going mad.
yeah,
And then something I also did was I tried to talk to the person to make peace, to see if I
yeah,
can, you know, fix, you know, if I've done anything wrong. Um, then it got to a position that then that person even got really bad. Like she tried to stab me in the back using that situation. Then something I also did was then I went back and thought, do I really want to go through this kind of nonsense?
yeah,
And especially in a workplace.
yeah,
And I had to think, is this salary worth this effort? You know, going to work like feeling like you don't know what you're going to expect next.
mm,
Um, then what I did was I wrote it down and I reported it to make it somebody, saying this is what is happening. What are you going to do? Can you fix this
yeah,
situation? Because I'm still open to resolving things,
yeah,
and I have no grudge or anything against someone. It's just understanding the differences and working
yeah,
together.
yeah,
But it still didn't happen. Uh, and then I then decided, okay, if you're not doing anything, then let me go, because I'm not going to put up with this forever,
yeah,
and it's not worth it. So then I had to decide that I'm going to walk out, but I
yeah,
still recorded everything and I submitted, and I even asked for an exit interview, which I never
yeah,
got. But I did record it and send it in an email
yeah,
because I knew there's then some kind of record is there. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean these things, and then also moving help, getting support. So my husband has been the biggest support for me. Whenever these kind of situations happen, then we talk
yeah,
about it and go through it.
yeah,
But yeah, support is so important, because otherwise you could
absolutely.
go crazy.
Yeah. And it's again, I would say, like I said earlier about going on sick leave, it's a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. And I think generally we shy away from asking for help, but I think, Obviously, you've got to know who you can trust, especially when you're in a toxic environment. So be careful to ask for help from anybody. You must ask for help from someone you can trust. And I agree. My husband's an amazing sounding board. I owe a lot of my sanity to him today. So I would just say, I mean, be careful who you ask for help, but don't shy away from asking for help, because it is, again, it's a sign of a strength. It's not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, I mean, you have to always ask questions and clarify things. Otherwise, you never know.
Absolutely.
Even when you think that someone is bullying, talk to them and find out, are they actually meaning it or not, or if you can. But yeah, so I think it's really helpful. I think this is a very good session. I could talk about this forever.
Yes, I think we should have another session, Shani, and we could go even deeper, because I think what we haven't even covered tonight was, so my 4-step process for how to deal with the bully is actually called ROAR as well. So recognize the behavior, observe and stay present, assert, so state how it makes you feel or ask them to clarify, and then redirect, so redirect the conversation towards win-win outcomes. And it's a sort of a formula that I've developed over the years. I'm not suggesting you will get it right every time, and it will take practice, but at least it gives you that little framework: recognize, observe, assert, redirect, recognize, observe, assert, redirect. So you can you have those mental cues, which helps you stay in your power zone. So if you think about your 4 superpowers, it helps you kind of stay engaged mentally, and then think quickly on your feet about the appropriate response.
Yeah.
And I think being able to deal with those situations,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that aligns with EQ here and emotional resilience. I think we should have another discussion probably with Jackie as well, who our emotional intelligence coach, and
I know
maybe on the
Jackie's
okay, that's good. Yeah, so she's been so helpful for me as well. And I know I loved her. I love her. So
she's amazing, wonderful woman. Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
And I would like to ask if the audience have any questions. This is your time to unmute and ask questions, guys.
I got a question.
Yes.
I'm Marilise.
Hi.
So I wanted to know if you can give me practical advice on something. So if you're dealing with someone who's being passive aggressive, how would you deal with them? And then someone else, if they are nice to your face, everything seems perfect, but then behind your back they're going telling stories about you and things. How do you deal with those 2 types of people? I don't know if we've got enough time for that.
So I mean, this is again, it's about reading the situation, and I think I mean I've had recently I've had two passive aggressive people that I've had to deal with, and in one case I think what did seem to work for me is to really almost be a little bit persistent, but keep asking open questions so that you really get to the nub of issues. And it got to the point where the passive aggressive then turns into frustration, but it is a case of you're asking that particular individual the right questions, but they don't want you to be asking those questions, and then it's really just a way to get them to a point where they can kind of acknowledge what you're saying, but you're not saying it direct to them. You're kind of exploring it and extracting that, if it makes sense. So you're almost not allowing them to be passive aggressive, if that makes sense. But you've got to be very careful about the questioning and how you apply those questioning techniques. I think it's really hard, Clive, because sometimes, you obviously, when you interact with people, you trust people. We as human beings, we kind of have this mindset of, you give people the benefit of the doubt, you want to justify people's behaviors, and then we're absolutely shocked and surprised when they turn out to be, backstabbers, and I think it's about shielding yourself. I don't know. It's also about, I would say, about it's almost like recognizing that there's a game, you're playing a game here, and almost like anticipating the next move a little bit. So it's almost like being really savvy, recognizing that they play a game, but you've obviously got to play your own game. So it's almost like anticipating and beating them at their own game. But you've got to be a little bit skeptical. You've got to almost be like, I'm expecting this individual to behave like that. So I think it's almost mentally preparing yourself for the worst, and not just trusting people. I think one of the myths that I would say I would really want to bust is around giving people the benefit of the doubt. No, people should earn your trust. So it's first about that trust test. So what have they done to earn your trust before you give them the benefit of the doubt? Because I think as a child, I always grew up and I was just like, oh, give them the benefit of the doubt, give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think, no, let's not do that. Let's expect them to earn our trust first, and then we can go from there. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that does. Thanks for that. Because I tend to be a trusting person, and it's such a foreign behavior to me. I can't imagine myself ever doing it. So it's difficult for me to try and get in their minds to figure out, why would you even do that? What does it accomplish? So I think that's good advice.
Yeah, especially if they are in positions of power. And I think also culturally, especially if you come from South Africa, where we have been, as children, children can be seen, but they cannot be heard. So you've always got to defer to the adults, because the adults always, authority, there's always the voice of authority. So you don't question authority. Culturally, for me, that was one of the hardest things to learn coming to the UK, is to be able to challenge authority and not being kind of almost like sir. And we were kind of in South Africa, we use like Mr. and Mrs. and Sir, and and it's very respectful language. And I was like, the first time I had to call partners by their names, when I came to the UK, it was like, oh my gosh, I struggled so much. It was so hard for me, because I felt like I was being disrespectful. So there is that cultural thing there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I had the same problem as well.
Yeah, I think we do, because we come from cultures that are very much about hierarchy and about respecting your elders.
Yeah, it took some time getting used to, not calling sir and madam. And
Yes. Same here.
I think there's another participant who wants to ask the question. Do you want to go on mute and ask?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Doki.
Hello. I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to spell your name. It's Marilise.
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 Yes.
So, like when it comes to my culture, like it's bullying is kind of like a thing which is embedded and normalized. So, like in Sri Lanka, I mean, so like it's seen like a lot frequently in social media, and in mostly like in the male and female community, like especially with my colleagues, and also because when it comes to boys, they need to be the alpha males, all of that. So but the thing is that they do not understand it, or they do not just think it as this is a thing that this is bullying, and we should limit it to a certain extent, but they just keep on going it, and it's a thing that is normalized. So like day by day, like a lot of victims, they just think about themselves low, and they get all those mental health issues, and it comes as a high count, and it's getting increased day by day. So like currently I'm working on a project, so on that I just discuss about ethics of online communication. So on that the bullying is a type of a part. So like I would love to ask that how to, like, in case if you find a victim who's suffered from bullying, which is like they don't have a place where they can, get help from. So how can you comfort them to, gain their confidence back, and to find like the one that the one that who bullied you was the wrongdoer. So how can you just motivate them? Like, is there a way? Like,
So in this particular case, is the person still in the situation, or have they already left the situation?
well, it's as I said before, it's kind of like normalized. You can get those
Yeah,
situations again and again.
yeah, yeah.
So
So it's incredibly hard, right? So this is really complex, and I guess if you're a lot of this is about the victim themselves recognizing and then finding the inner strength and the courage to
yeah.
either speak up um,
Hmm.
and or to walk away. And if you do speak up, you've got to be very careful, because I always say if the person is a bully, you've got to be careful not to throw fuel on the fire. So the way that you speak up, you've got to be comfortable as the victim to speak up and to try and to have a go, but also don't do it if you are fearing for your safety and for your own wellness. Because if that person is a really toxic bully and it is normalized and they've done it again and again and again and again, I think it's better to seek help. Now, we've talked about HR, and we've talked about the problems with HR and not necessarily supporting the victims sufficiently. So there are certain things that the victims can do, but it is a case of, in my case, I
Like
started.
leaving the situation, like
Well,
that would
so
be.
so I think leaving is probably the bravest thing to do in that situation. The
Yeah,
problem is it's not easy to leave, because a lot of victims, they need the money, they need the job security, they've got financial circumstances or family circumstances which doesn't necessarily just allow them to walk away. But I would really strongly encourage any victims, if your mental health is suffering, even if you just remove yourself from the situation for a few weeks, because that in itself will help you to gain perspective, and then you can work out how to deal with it. Because there is, if you think about help and support available, I started working with an NHS psychologist for a little while, just towards the end, because I was really struggling with my mental health and struggling, to kind of make sense of it all. I didn't really understand what was happening to me, even right up until the end. So I started getting some professional help as well myself, but that sort of quickly then escalated, because I then left the organization shortly thereafter. So that you have, obviously you can get professional help as well. So yeah, but I'm very happy to take kind of the conversation offline with you and give you a little bit more insight and information if you want.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
good.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Thank you, guys. I think we
Thank
kind
you.
of it's really worth it. I think we've gone a bit over the hour, but I think we should definitely continue this discussion. So thank you, Marilise, for
Oh, you're so
coming on
welcome. You're
the
so welcome,
platform.
and thank you so much for having me. It's so good to meet you, and Clive, you as well.
Yeah,
And
we should have a proper
You as
coffee.
well.
Yes.
We should, when we can meet face to face, or we could just have a virtual coffee.
I know.
Oh, so funny. My sister and I started having virtual coffees. She's in South Africa, so it's so funny.
Yeah, I need to do that at some point. I've been having a lot of virtual coffees with people these days.
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
planning to have a virtual meetup, which is really good because normally meetups are local.
Yeah,
Now that it can be global, you can invite anybody to the
anybody can
meetup.
join. Oh, that
Yes,
sounds
so that's the
amazing.
plan. And the boot camp also, we are planning to have it in summer. I think our lives are going to be like this for another
I think so. At
12
least
months or
a
so.
few months. Yeah, I think so. We have to
So
prepare for the worst.
yeah, but thank you very
Good.
much. And
Oh,
if you'd
welcome.
like to join the CISO or support CISO or collaborate, get in touch with us. We are on info@shecisoexec.org email address, or you can contact us on LinkedIn. So we got two groups in LinkedIn. We are more active on LinkedIn, but we are on other platforms as well. The LinkedIn company page as well as the LinkedIn group page. So LinkedIn group is for the members who join us, and LinkedIn company page is all the notifications are there, so you can follow us and keep up with the new updates that's coming up. And yeah, join us. It's a free community, and we help and support each other. So you're welcome to join and connect with us. Thank you very much then.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.